Welcome to Stream Mechanics. Today, we are not just telling a story, we are solving a biological and magical mystery that has plagued the history of Westeros for 5,000 years. It is a question that every fan has asked the first time they saw Daenerys Targaryen step out of the fire unburned, or watched Daemon Targaryen lean comfortably against the neck of a sleeping monster the size of a warship. Why them? Why is it that only a Targaryen can approach an apex predator capable of melting stone and not be instantly incinerated? And perhaps more importantly, why do the dragons let them do it? Why does a creature of pure fire and magic, a creature that acknowledges no master, submit to a tiny, fragile human being on its back? The common answer you will hear in taverns from Winterfell to Dorne is simple. It is because they are the blood of the dragon. Because they are special. Because they are kings. But that is not the whole truth. In fact, that is a comfortable lie told to hide a much darker reality. To understand why a dragon allows a rider, we have to go back thousands of years. Before the Iron Throne, before the Seven Kingdoms, back to the source of the nightmare itself, Ancient Valyria. First, we must dismantle a massive historical misconception that most people believe. The ability to ride dragons is not exclusive to the name Targaryen. If you were to walk the streets of the Valyrian Freehold at its height, you would see the sky filled with leather wings. But they wouldn't just be Targaryens. In the zenith of the Valyrian Freehold, the greatest and most terrifying empire the world has ever seen, there were roughly 40 Dragonlord families. 40 distinct houses that commanded the skies. And here is the fascinating, almost humiliating truth for House Targaryen. They were not the kings of Valyria. They were not the emperors. In the hierarchy of the 40 families, the Targaryens were minor nobles. They were one of the weaker houses. They were the runts of the litter. So, if there were 40 families, powerful, ancient, wealthy dynasties, why are the Targaryens the only ones left who can bond with these beasts? Because they were the only ones who survived the apocalypse? But we will get to the doom later. For now, we need to look at the biology. What makes these 40 families different from the rest of humanity? Why can't a Stark, with their warging blood, ride a dragon? Why can't a Lannister, with all the gold in the world, buy a dragon hatchling and raise it? The answer lies in the soil of Sothoryos and the dark pits of the 14 Flames. Deep lore, supported by the forbidden texts of Sept and Barth, suggests that dragons as we know them are not entirely natural animals. They are likely the result of genetic engineering. In the southern continent of Sothoryos, there are creatures called wyverns. They look like dragons. They have the wings, the scales, the hunger. But they do not breathe fire. And they are smaller. And in the volcanoes of Valyria, there were fire wyrms? Massive, tunneling parasites that breathed fire but had no wings. The Valyrians were shepherds. But they were also blood mages. It is believed that thousands of years ago, they used blood rituals to crossbreed these species. To fuse the size and flight of the wyvern with the fire magic of the wyrm. But they didn't stop there. And this is where the story turns into horror. To control a weapon that powerful, you cannot use a whip. You cannot use a chain. You cannot use fear. A dragon is a nuclear weapon with a will of its own. To control it, you need a connection that bypasses the brain and goes straight to the soul. The text suggests that the ancient Valyrians didn't just tame dragons. They mixed their own blood with them. We are talking about industrial-scale blood magic rituals. The 40 families didn't just ride the beasts. They became kin to them. They rewrote their own genetic code to include the magical markers of the dragon. This is the blood of the dragon. It is not a metaphor. It is a biological receipt. Think of a dragon like a supercomputer with a biometric lock. You cannot hack it. You cannot force it. You need the exact right biometric data to turn the key. Valyrian Dragonlord blood is that biometric key. This is why a Stark or a Baratheon will almost always be roasted alive if they try to claim a dragon. Their blood does not have the markers. To a dragon, a Lannister just smells like meat. But a Targaryen? A Targaryen smells like family. This biological imperative explains the single most controversial practice in Westerosi history, the incest. For centuries, the Targaryens married brother to sister, aunt to nephew, cousin to cousin. To the faith of the Seven, this was a sin against the gods. To the common people, it was madness. But to the Targaryens, it was survival. They knew, perhaps instinctively or perhaps from lost knowledge passed down from Enar the Exile, that this magical genetic marker in their blood was recessive. It was fragile. It was a flame that could easily be extinguished. They believed that if their blood became too diluted by marrying regular humans, if they married too many Starks or Tyrells or Martells, the genetic key would fade. The magic would wash out of their DNA. And if they lost the magic, they lost the dragons. And if they lost the dragons, they were just normal men with silver hair. And if you look at the history of the Dance of the Dragons, they were right. As the bloodline diluted, the dragons became smaller, sicklier, harder to hatch. The magic was dying because the vessel, the Targaryen body, was becoming too human. This leads us to the physical evidence, the proof that is staring us right in the face. Why do they look the way they do? Silver platinum hair that shines like metal, eyes the color of violet, indigo, and purple. These are not natural human colors. In the world of ice and fire, no other race possesses these traits naturally. These features are the biological residue of the blood magic itself. They are the scar tissue of the ritual. There is a prominent theory that the Valyrians are essentially human chimeras. They are a hybrid species created to act as the interface between men and monsters. And if that sounds too wild to believe, consider the horrifying tragedies that Targaryen women face in childbirth. We hear whispers of this throughout the books and the shows. When Rhaenyra, or later Daenerys, have stillborn children, the descriptions are not of human babies. The maesters describe them as having scales, small leather wings, or tails. This is the darkest proof of all. It suggests that their DNA is quite literally unstable. It is partially draconic. The magic that allows them to rule the skies comes at a terrible biological cost. They engineered themselves to be gods. But nature has a way of reminding them that they are monsters. Now, as we peel back these layers, you might be asking the same question that many clever observers ask. Wait a minute. If it requires Dragonlord blood, then why do we see members of House Valyrian riding dragons in House of the Dragon? Look at Lord Corlys Valyrian, the sea snake. He has the silver hair. He has the purple eyes. He is purest old Valyria. Yet he cannot ride a dragon. If he tried, Vhagar would eat him as a snack. Why? Because there were two types of Valyrians. There were the 40 Dragonlord families, the elite aristocracy who performed the blood magic rituals. And then there were regular Valyrians, the merchants, the sailors, the commoners. House Valyrian was a powerful, ancient family of sea merchants. But they were not Dragonlords. Their blood does not have the magic binding. So why do Corlys' children, Laenor and Lena, ride dragons? Look at their mother, Rhaenys Targaryen, the queen who never was. They are riding strictly because of their maternal bloodline. That single drop of Targaryen blood gave them the genetic key. This leads to a fascinating realization about how this magic works. Having the blood doesn't guarantee you will ride. It just means you are allowed to try. Think of Valyrian Dragonlord blood as a ticket to enter the most dangerous lottery in the world. If you don't have the blood, you don't have a ticket? You can't even enter the room. If you do have the blood, you get to enter the room. But the dragon might still reject you. It might still kill you. But you have a chance. This is why the dragon seeds, the bastards you see later in the Dance of the Dragons, are so important to the lore. The Targaryens spent centuries leaving illegitimate children all over Dragonstone and King's Landing. Poor, low-born blacksmiths and townspeople who had no idea they carried the magical genetic key. When the call went out for riders, many of them died trying. But the ones who succeeded proved a vital point. The dragons do not care about your last name. They do not care if you are a prince or a peasant. They only care if your blood smells like old Valyria. Just because you have the key does not mean the dragon will let you open the door. And this brings us to the second great mystery, the psychology of the bond. How does a human mind connect with a reptile mind without going insane? And why is it that once a dragon chooses you, it will never, ever, let anyone else ride it as long as you live? To understand that, we have to leave the biology behind and enter the realm of the spirit. We have to talk about the soul bond. We have established that Valyrian blood is the key to the lock. It is the biological permission slip that keeps you from being eaten. But permission is not the same as control. A dragon is not a horse. You do not break it. You do not train it with sugar cubes. A dragon is a force of nature with the intelligence of a human and the instincts of a god. When a Targaryen claims a dragon, something profound happens that goes far beyond simple animal husbandry. In the books, and hinted at in the shows, we see evidence that the writer and the dragon share a psychic link. They are not two beings anymore. They are one entity sharing two bodies. We saw this clearly in House of the Dragon. Remember the war in the Stepstones? When Demon Targaryen is struck by an arrow in the shoulder, miles away in the sky, his dragon Caraxes screams in pain at the exact same moment. When Helaena Targaryen throws herself from the window in the Red Keep, her dragon Dreamfire, locked away in the dragon pit on the other side of the city, roars so loud it shakes the foundations of the building and snaps two of her chains. They feel what the other feels. The dragon becomes an extension of the rider's will, and the rider becomes an extension of the dragon's fury. This psychic connection explains the most unbreakable rule of dragon riding: the monogamy of the beast. A dragon will only accept one rider at a time. As long as that rider lives, no one else, not even another Targaryen with the purest blood, can mount that dragon. It does not matter if the rider is sick, or imprisoned, or thousands of miles away. The seat is taken. This is a built-in failsafe of the blood magic. Imagine the chaos if it were different. If dragons were like horses, you could steal them. You could jump onto an enemy's dragon mid-battle and turn it against them. But you can't. Because the dragon knows. The dragon feels the heartbeat of its rider. This bond is so intense that when a rider dies, the dragon often goes wild with grief. And when a dragon dies, the rider feels a part of their soul being ripped away. It is a marriage of fire and blood that only death can end. So, we have a picture of a civilization that used dark magic to bind themselves to monsters. They created a race of beautiful, powerful, genetically unstable dragon riders. They were the apex predators of the world. The 40 families of Valyria ruled everything they touched. Their empire stretched across the known world. Their towers toppled the clouds. Their steel was sharper than any other. They were gods on earth. So, what happened to them? If they were so powerful, if they had hundreds of dragons and thousands of sorcerers, why are the Targaryens the only ones left? The answer is the Doom. It wasn't a war. It wasn't a slow decline. It wasn't a plague. It was an apocalypse that happened in a single afternoon. And to understand why it happened, we have to look at the source of their power. Valyria was built on a peninsula that contained a massive chain of 14 volcanoes known as the 14 Flames. These weren't just mountains. They were the engines of the empire. The Valyrians mined these volcanoes for gold and silver, and they used the intense heat to forge their famous Valyrian steel. But volcanoes are unstable. To keep them from erupting, the Valyrians used powerful fire mages. Day and night, for thousands of years, these sorcerers cast spells to calm the earth, to keep the magma in check. They were literally fighting gravity and geology with magic. But power always comes with a cost, and the cost of Valyria was paid in blood. The mines of the 14 Flames were a hell on earth. The Valyrians were slavers. They captured people from every nation they conquered and threw them into the pits. The heat was so intense that slaves would often die just from walking into the tunnels. And it was in this darkness, in the misery of the slave pits, that a new religion was born. A religion that worshipped death. The slaves prayed for an end to their suffering. And since life was torture, they believed that death was a gift. These slaves became the first Faceless Men. And here is where the history connects to the present in a terrifying way. There is a major theory in the lore that suggests the Doom of Valyria was not an accident. It was an assassination. The theory goes like this. The Faceless Men grew in power. They infiltrated the highest levels of Valyrian society. And on one specific day, they struck. They didn't attack the armies. They didn't attack the dragons. They assassinated the mages. They killed the sorcerers who were maintaining the containment spells on the 14 Flames. And without the magic to hold it back, the earth finally took its revenge. The doom was absolute. All 14 volcanoes erupted at once. The explosion was so massive it didn't just bury the city, it physically shattered the continent. If you look at a map of the known world, the smoking sea where Valyria used to be looks like a shattered mirror. That is because the land quite literally exploded. Mountains were blown into the sky. The sea boiled. Tsunami waves 1,000 feet high crashed into the coastlines. The air became so toxic that dragons burning in the sky simply fell dead. Every dragon, every wizard, every great library of knowledge, every secret of how to make Valyrian steel, and 39 of the 40 Dragonlord families. They were incinerated in an instant. The greatest civilization in human history vanished in the blink of an eye. The silence that followed must have been deafening. The world had changed forever. The gods were dead. But, on a gloomy, wet island off the coast of Westeros, one family was still alive. The Targaryens. And this brings us to the most fascinating twist in the entire saga. If the Doom killed everyone, if the most powerful sorcerers in the world couldn't stop it, how did the Targaryens survive? Remember, they were one of the weaker families. The other Dragonlords were richer. They had bigger armies. They had more dragons. But those other families were arrogant. They believed their empire would last forever. They were busy playing the Game of Thrones in Valyria, fighting for status and power. The Targaryens had something the others did not. They had a dreamer. 12 years before the Doom, a young daughter of House Targaryen named Daenerys had a vision. She possessed the rare magical ability of prophetic dreams. She saw the fire. She saw the ocean boiling. She saw the end of the world. She went to her father, Aegon Targaryen, and she told him what she saw. And Aegon did something that no other Dragonlord would have done. He believed her. He sold everything. He sold his estates in Valyria. He packed up his family. He took his 5 dragons, including a young Valyrian the Black Dread, and he fled. He moved his entire house to the Dragonstone, a bleak, volcanic outpost at the very edge of the map. And here is the incredible part. The part that history often forgets. The other Dragonlords, the strong families, they laughed at the Targaryens. They mocked them. They called them cowards for running away. They thought Aegon was a fool who was scared of a bad dream. For 12 years, the Targaryens sat on their rock, enduring the ridicule of their peers. But then, the sky turned red. And the laughing stopped. The strong burned because they were blind. The weak survived because they had vision. This moment defines everything that follows. The Targaryens were the only ones left. They were the sole inheritors of the power of dragons. But why? Was it just luck? Was it just a coincidence that one girl had a bad dream? Or was it destiny? We now know, thanks to the revelations in House of the Dragon, that Daenerys wasn't the only one who dreamed. Aegon the Conqueror, the man who would eventually use those surviving dragons to burn Westeros, he also had a dream. And his dream changes everything we thought we knew about the Game of Thrones. It wasn't about power. It was about the end of the world. To understand the future, we have to look at the prophecy of ice and fire. For decades, we thought the story was about ambition. We thought Targaryens conquered Westeros because they wanted power. Because they were dragon-riding bullies who wanted the Iron Throne. But with that one reveal, George R.R. Martin turned it into a story about burden. We now know that Aegon the Conqueror didn't just conquer Westeros because he could. He conquered it because he must. He foresaw the White Walkers. He saw the long night. And he realized that unless a Targaryen united the realm with dragons, humanity would go extinct. It wasn't a conquest. It was a rescue mission. This completely changes how we view the entire Targaryen dynasty. For years, we thought Targaryens went mad because of inbreeding or arrogance. We called it the Targaryen madness. But look at it through the lens of the prophecy. What if the madness is actually the weight of the prophecy? Imagine knowing that an apocalypse is coming, but no one believes you. You have to conquer them. You have to burn their armies and force them to unite, or everyone dies. That kind of pressure would break anyone's mind. It makes characters like Daenerys or Rhaegar tragic figures. They weren't just conquerors. They were trying to fulfill a destiny they barely understood. This leads us to the tragedy of Jon Snow. Rhaegar Targaryen. Jon's father was obsessed with this prophecy. He believed his son would be the prince that was promised. He started a war and died for it. And the irony is, he was right. Jon Snow was the Song of Ice and Fire. He had the blood of the first men from the Starks, and the blood of old Valyria from the Targaryens. He did unite the realm to fight the Night King. But Rhaegar never lived to see it. And Jon never wanted it. There is a physical object that ties this whole tragedy together. The Catspaw dagger. In House of the Dragon, notice the dagger that Viserys carries. It is the same dagger that was used to try and kill Bran Stark in Season 1. It is the dagger Arya used to kill the Night King. Viserys reveals that the prophecy is literally engraved on the steel of that dagger, visible only in fire. It reads, "From my blood come the prince that was promised, and his will be the song of ice and fire." It is a chilling detail. The weapon that started the War of the Five Kings, the weapon that destroyed the Stark family, was actually a desperate message from the past trying to save them. Martin took a standard fantasy trope, the Chosen One, and twisted it into a generational curse that destroys the very family trying to save the world. So, to answer the question we started with, why them? The Targaryens ride dragons because they are the sole survivors of a civilization that genetically modified themselves via blood magic to bond with these beasts. The dragons let them ride because they recognize this specific blood signature as kin, not food. But the reason they are here, the reason they survived the Doom when everyone else burned, is because they were chosen. Nature, or magic, selected them. The Doom wiped out the bullies of Valyria, the slavers and warmongers who were abusing blood magic. It spared the one family that had the foresight to leave, perhaps precisely so they could eventually stop the Night King thousands of years later. The Targaryens weren't the mighty conquerors we thought they were. They were the Noah's Ark of the Valyrian race. They were the vessel chosen to carry the magic forward into a new world. And that leaves us with one final, terrifying question. If the Targaryens are the champions of fire, created by blood magic to save the world, then what is the true nature of the ice in the north? We know the stories of the children of the forest. We know they plunged a dragonglass dagger into a man's heart to create a weapon to fight the first men. But what actually happened in that ritual? How did a desperate act of war create a force that nearly destroyed the world? And was that man, the first White Walker, a Stark? That is the story of the White Walkers, and that is where we go next.